Today's Friday, May 8th, and it actually represents the end of 6 weeks of TechStrong TV. I feel like we just started doing this yesterday, but it's been 6 weeks. This is the 30th episode, and here's the good news. We're not running out of any content. We have more people reaching out to us, asking to appear for an interview. If you're watching this and you think you'd like to add to the conversation, you want to be interviewed, reach out to me. Alan at devops.com, ALAN, and we'll take a look at it. Anyway, I hope this week has been good for you. I hope, by this point everybody's kind of settled in. We're kind of looking forward now maybe to our next phase. Some of you might be returning to an office soon. I wouldn't be rushing returning to an office, truthfully, but everyone does what is best for themselves, I guess. Anyway, let me tell you what we have in store for today's show. As usual, you can find us on Facebook Live, LinkedIn Live, DevOps.com, Container Journal, Security Boulevard, mobile app, DevOps.com, Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV on the DevOps.com app on your TV. Lots of places to watch this, no matter where you are. It's all good. The TechStrong.TV site does have live chat during it, so if you want to participate that way, or you can participate on our community Slack channel, techstrongtv.slack.com. Go to techstrong.tv to get an invite to the Slack channel. And then individual segments, interviews, are also up in our Digital Anarchist site, digitalanarchist.com. Check that out if you're interested. Anyway, what do we got in store for you today, this glorious Friday, heading into the weekend? First of all, we have Matt Chiodi, who's the CSO Public Cloud at Palo Alto Networks. He's going to talk about some research that their Unit 42 team did on COVID-related domains. We'll get into that. Then we have a really good interview with the CDO, Chief Data Officer for Unravel, Sandeep Udamchandani. And Sandeep really goes deep on, what's kind of the state of data APM, data ops, and how COVID and everything going on with, work environments is affecting that. It's a good interview. I think you'll enjoy it. And then I went into the archives today for our Something Old. I went a little deeper. Went back to DevOps Enterprise Summit, Vegas last year. Good interview, actually, Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor, did with Damon Edwards, Cornelia Davis, and Tom Limoncelli about next-gen ops, and I think you'll find that a good one. I hope you'll enjoy it. After that, I'll be back for the news, and then after the news, get ready to limber up. It's Jeremy Jones, Working From Home Fitness, and Jeremy has a great workout today for you guys. We're going to be adding another kind of element to that too. Stay tuned, hopefully soon. We're going to be adding a weekly yoga segment as well. So if you like Working From Home Fitness, I think you'll like the yoga. And of course, those are available as standalone videos to do at your leisure on techstrong.tv as well as Digital Anarchist. After Jeremy, we're going to jump things over to Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor. And Charlene has two good interviews today, one with John Towns, Executive Director for Science and Technology at the National Center for Supercomputing Applications, and then one with EVP of M&J Technologies, it looks like. And then we have the Analyst Corner with Mitchell Ashley. And Mitch always has good stuff. He has a good video lined up for today. And then I'll be back to wrap things up. It's a great way to spend your Friday heading into your weekend. We're going to take a quick commercial break right now. We'll be back with our TechStrong TV show for the rest of the day.
Tech is strong. We may be working from home, but tech goes on. Tech will continue to collaborate. Tech will continue to communicate. Tech is strong. Join us for TechStrong Con, June 4th, 12 hours strong, Tech Strong. Featuring John Bacagallupe Willis, Shannon Leitz, William Hurley, Jasmine James, Kat Swatell, Cornelia Davis, James Wickett, Courtney Kissler, Damon Edwards. Live Q&A with speakers, exhibit halls, and more. free, but register before spots fill at techstrongcon.com.
First interview today is Matt Chiotti. He's the CSO for Public Cloud at Palo Alto Networks. Matt, as part of his duties, also works with the Unit 42 threat research team at Palo Alto. They recently did a survey of COVID-related domains and websites that have been registered recently. And, the bad news is they found over 86,000 COVID domains that are characterized as risky or not good, or worse than risky. And, it kind of bums you out because it's bad enough we have to deal with COVID and people dying and people getting sick and people being, quarantined at their houses and shortages of toilet paper and food and everything else. But now you also have these people who are preying on other people with cyber scams and crimes and fake news and all that stuff. So Matt goes into that and kind of what their findings were. I think it's a great interview. I hope you'll enjoy it. Here's Matt Chiotti, CSO Public Cloud, Palo Alto Networks.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on this segment for TechStrong TV. My guest for this segment is Matthew Chiotti from Palo Alto Networks. Matt, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Good morning, Alan. How are you?
I'm as good as we were talking off camera, as good as we are in this new normal, right?
That's right.
Semi-healthy, I think, and working better than not working.
That's right.
So, what can I say? Matt, I'm going to give you a chance to tell our audience about who you are and your role at Palo Alto.
Sure. I'm Matt Chiotti. I'm the Chief Security Officer of Public Cloud at Palo Alto Networks. All that means is my exclusive focus is everything that Palo Alto is doing around cloud security.
Excellent. And Matt, how long have you been at Palo Alto?
Just over 2 years. I came over as part of the Redlock acquisition in October of 2018.
Sure. I mean, Palo Alto has done a really nice job of, for a company that didn't really have a cloud strategy there for a while, right, or a place, they've done a really nice job with a couple of nice acquisitions and some nice work around it. Of course, the whole Prisma thing and
yeah, they've done a great job spending over about $1 billion in the last 2 years. Really doing a good bit of both acquisition growth, but also organic growth, as you mentioned, around our Prisma Cloud platform. So it's been very exciting to be here.
And quite frankly, well, up until this COVID thing, even with this COVID thing, $1 billion doesn't go as far as it used to. Easy come, easy go. But anyway, Matt, I want to thank you for joining us, and we're going to talk a little bit about some research that you guys did around some of these COVID-related websites.
Sure.
So why don't you set the stage here for us a little bit on what kind of research and what some of the findings were?
Sure. So one of the teams that I have the privilege to lead at Palo Alto Networks is our Unit 42 Cloud Threat Research team. This is a group of elite cloud threat researchers, and that's all they focus on is everything that's happening in the public cloud. And so what we wanted to do specific to the pandemic that we're all working through right now is look at all of the newly registered domains that have been created. And so we analyzed over 1.2 million of these newly registered domains, and we looked specifically for keywords like COVID, vaccine, and things like that. And what we found was that about just over 86,000 of them we found to be risky or malicious. 86,000 of them.
That's crazy. We've been reporting now for a couple of weeks that, in the cybersecurity industry anyway, or the cybersecurity community, we seem to be facing a double pandemic, a pandemic of the coronavirus and COVID disease, but also a pandemic of bad people trying to, capitalize and cash in and do malicious things using COVID and coronavirus as sort of the not the attack surface, but as the transmission vector, if you will. Um, and, so first of all, it makes one kind of lose faith in humanity a little bit to know that there's so many people out there who are looking, to do malicious things and just bad things on top of the human misery that we're already seeing. But, I mean, it's a staggering amount of domains. Did you guys go to the next step and say, okay, what exactly? I mean, maybe some of them are. I'm sure some of them are legitimate information domains. But what did you find when you looked at these domains?
So, what we did is we looked at a couple things. We used a bunch of different Palo Alto Networks tools, specifically our URL filtering service. And what that does is it uses a combination of threat intelligence as well as machine learning to analyze the domains as they've come up. And, you can go to unit42.paloaltonetworks.com and you can see we've done a bunch of different research across the board on these. But, typically, as I mentioned, over 86,000 of these we found to be risky or malicious. Now, like you said, this is the initial findings. And what we've seen from past research is that a lot of times these domains are simply spun up and then they're kind of put on the shelf, maybe even to just season a little bit. And what they'll do is they'll then take them when they need them, and then they'll put them into practice. And we've seen them use them in the past for things like phishing and ransomware. That's typically how these things tend to play out. As you mentioned right now, Alan, global crisis wherein people are looking for supplies related to COVID, maybe like an N95 mask. And what they might do is bring up one of these domains and then host something that's malicious, right? I put my information in, maybe it's for my family or maybe it's for my business to get a product. And then, that's one way that a credit card could be stolen. Maybe I download a file and it locks out my system with ransomware. That's typically how these newly registered domains, specifically the ones that we found to be risky or malicious, are used.
I've said it before, I'll say it again. It's why we can't have nice things. The internet would be such a great tool if we didn't have these kinds of people running these kinds of things. Matt, wondering, did you look at any kind of geography of where these were registered, maybe where they're hosted, stuff like that?
We did. We broke it down in a couple different ways. Interestingly enough, we found that from a location perspective, the vast majority of them are hosted actually right here in the United States, only followed closely by Italy. And from a distribution standpoint, some good news here. Only just about 3% of that 86,000 plus were actually hosted by public cloud providers like Google and Azure, only 3%. So there's a bit of a silver lining there for the public cloud. And we think that the number is so low of these newly registered domains in the public cloud. We think it's because of it costs a little bit more to do it, and that the cloud service providers, again, like Azure and Google and AWS, have more stringent filtering processes when people are trying to do these types of things.
Makes sense. It makes sense. But on the other hand, there's no shortage of hosting providers and private cloud, hosting in the U.S. Now, so Unit 42, right, doing threat research. We have a large part of our audience who aren't cyber, Matt. They're DevOps, they're dev, cloud native transformation folks. Give us, if you can, the path of, okay, so we did this basic research. We've identified 80,000+ risky domains. How does that get to the front lines of protecting you, me, and worse than you and me, people who maybe aren't as cyber savvy? How do we get from there to here, or here to there?
It's a great question. I mean, one of the things that I think differentiates, Palo Alto Networks is the fact that we oftentimes lead with our threat research. We really use it to inform our product strategy and the places that we're going. And, specific, to your question is, how this relates to, right now, so many people are working from home. In fact, organizations that might have had, 2 to 5% of their workforce working from home are now upwards and close to 100%. And so, before, I think many organizations felt pretty comfortable with, their workers when they were on campus. They've got all these security tools that they've invested in. But now that they're working from home, a lot of those protections are just no longer there. And so, what you can do and how someone could utilize this threat research is to actually look at what type of protections they have in place now that their employees are working from home. Do they have that capability to be able to provide that same level of protection that they had when they were on campus that they now have when they're at home? And so this is, again, we talked a little bit at the beginning around what Palo Alto has done over the last number of years. And one of the areas we've spent a lot on investing is our Prisma Access. And what that does is it just gives you the ability as an enterprise to provide that same level of protection no matter where your user is, whether they're working from home, whether they're working from a coffee shop. And so this is where it kind of comes full circle with the threat research, right? It's being able to provide that same level of protection for your user no matter where they are.
Excellent. Matt, just for people viewing this at home, look, I've clicked on a bunch. I've bought, from anticipating when people come back in our office, I've bought a whole bunch of HN95 masks. I've bought more cleaners. We've bought gloves. We've bought digital infrared thermometers and stuff like this, to equip the office. And I'm careful when I go to the sites, right? I tend to go to sites that I've heard of, but it's so hard finding this equipment. You'll go anywhere, it seems. And so if you give a little advice to people who maybe aren't cyber savvy, what are like telltale signs of some of these scam sites and malicious sites that people, might be able to just like a quick top 3 things to look for?
Sure. I think, number one, and even, I've been in cybersecurity for over just about 20 years now. And like you, I went out and I've purchased some of these products. And I can tell you the process that I went through. Number one is obviously, as a Palo Alto employee, I have the benefit of using our own Prisma Access technology.
Yeah,
but one of the things,
that's nice.
It is, right? I mean, I feel much more protected being able to have that. But I think beyond that, one of the things that I will do is, number one, is to not just look directly at a Google search, but actually look at the domain and say, does this business have a social media presence? Go out and look at what they have on Facebook, right? Don't just click right on the URL. Take that information, go to Facebook, look at their page. Is there a history to that? Do they have a Twitter feed, right? Is it something that's only been brought up and you only see traffic in the last, 2 months? You need to look for a history there. And I think we do need to take this seriously. Again, we analyzed 1.2 million of these domains, over 86,000 of them. And this is just our data set, right? It's just a couple of weeks, right? So there's people who have been working on this a lot longer than that. And certainly there's just so many new that are coming up every day that people really do need to take that extra step. Don't just go off the Google search. Go look to see, does the business have a historical presence? Have they been in this business before? And then, of course, one other thing we always recommend is just because you get an email and it looks legitimate, don't click on links specifically unless you asked for it. Even if it's from a quote unquote trusted source, I would say to still, during these times, take that extra step, go and look. Does the company have a history? Did you specifically ask someone to send you that link?
Good advice. Great stuff, Matt. There's another category, and I don't know if Palo Alto can help with that, but it's around the whole fake news thing around COVID.
Sure.
Right? There are 87,000 or 86,000 shady domains that might be pushing, malware or similar kind of stuff. I bet you there's another 80,000 domains that are registered around the COVID name and everything else that aren't really selling products. They're just pushing fake news and propaganda and scare stuff and not scare stuff. It's no better than the flu. It's the worst thing in the world. Whatever side of the political thing you want to believe in, right? of the spectrum. There are sites that just have flat out nonsense, right? But people are rallying around this, right? You see, you go on Facebook, you go on Twitter, and you see people citing such craziness. And a lot, and I'm wondering, does Palo Alto sort of have a category for fake news sites or something like that should be avoided?
Part of our URL filtering service, we will categorize URLs by what we find, again, using machine learning and threat intelligence. I think, the answer to really that does come to just around the strength of the community. When we look at, for example, what a lot of the large providers are doing, I mean, they are using machine learning, they're using all those types of things to try to just analyze that volume. This is one of those things that, because there's such a large volume of data, humans just don't do a very good job at analyzing. And this is a really great application for machine learning. And this is what we're seeing some of the largest providers do. And again, this is what we are using ourselves in our URL filtering service to be able to do some of those types of things, to be able to categorize such a massive volume of domains as they come online every day.
Not an easy job, man. Not an easy job. It's an interesting question, though. So, Unit 42, I assume, is working remotely now like everyone else is.
We are.
Right? How's that affected the performance of the team?
I would say from our perspective, and even specific to my team, we are very much used to working in a very distributed culture. And I think this is a benefit to Palo Alto Networks in that we've always had that flexibility. And so while certainly it's not to the same volume that we would usually work remotely, I personally have not seen any drop in production from our teams. I think, to be fair, the first probably week or two, there was just, I think everybody was feeling a certain level of fear. But I think after we kind of got over those initial 1 to 2 weeks, I've actually seen just an increase because, Palo Alto is an amazing company. One of the things our CEO came out and talked publicly about was just the COVID-19 fund that we created internally, that the executive team gave to just help out our hourly and our wage employees. And just kind of seeing that commitment from the executive level down, I think really fired up our employee base to really just to focus and to just continue to be that cybersecurity leader of choice.
That's great, man. Great stuff. What about public cloud functionality? Look, the internet, is it perfect? No. But when you look at what we've been doing over the last month, 6 weeks, whatever, the internet itself has held up remarkably well, right? The fact that you and I are on this video thing, I'm watching you in HD video. It's, let's not complain. And quite frankly, the public cloud has performed as advertised, right? That elasticity, burstability, whatever you want to call these features that make up public cloud have allowed Zoom here to probably increase traffic by 50 or 75%, and Slack and all of these other tools that we're now depending on. They all run on 99% of it anyway, run on the public cloud, and we haven't seen, knock wood, we haven't seen wide scale outages of cloud. But, that's at a high level. I'm wondering if, you guys probably look at a little deeper. How have you seen, is it as solid as it seems?
I've written a number of blogs, and one of my most recent blogs specifically on cloud and COVID-19, I talked about that, right? As you mentioned, I think it was Microsoft who came out publicly and said that their Teams usage, specifically in Italy, was up 775%, right?
Yeah,
So you're right. I haven't seen anything that has indicated that any of these public cloud providers have had any type of service disruption. So you're right. Kind of the promise of cloud around, unlimited scalability, it has proven itself. And I think this is the reason why those kind of cloud delivered security services have really gained so much popularity, especially during this crisis, right? And I mentioned before our Prisma Access product, it's based in the cloud, it runs in the cloud, it has that ability to continue to scale. And we've seen even that can scale just beyond just even what we expected. So certainly we have seen that. Now I think, when I think about some of our previous threat research, most of the time when you hear about public cloud security, it's typically to the negative, right? Our previous research, we analyzed over 18 months of cloud security incidents, and we found that 65% of those incidents were the result of customer misconfigurations, 65%. And that's a really large number. So when we talk about cloud security from that perspective, it's typically, if there's a security problem, it's usually on the cloud consumer's fault, not on the cloud service provider. In fact, cloud service providers have actually done a really good job for the portion of the security that they're responsible for.
Agreed. And you know what? Congratulations and kudos to them, right? I'm like you, I'm in security 20 years, and I was so tired of reading the surveys that what are the top 3 inhibitors to cloud adoption? Number 1, security. I read too many of those headlines, Matt. And I realized early on that there were very few organizations who could put the money and resources into security that an AWS or a Google or a Microsoft, as your team was. But it's good to see out there. Hey, we're about out of time. One last question. I see behind you have your collection of conference speaker or conference attendee badges. When you think we might see you back on a conference circuit?
I hope it's soon. I have been just on Zoom after Zoom after Zoom. I love Zoom, like you said, great product. But I'm really anxious to kind of get back out there in the field, to travel again, and to just meet people in their geographic location. So I don't know when that comes, but I hope it is soon. I hope it's soon.
You and me both. I haven't been home this long in about 20, 25 years. I don't know how my wife's putting up with me. But anyway, hey, Matt Chiodi. Matt, say your name for me again, because I messed that one up. Chiodi. That's right. Okay. Matt Chiodi, Palo Alto Networks. Thanks for joining us on TechStrong TV today, man.
Thanks for having me out. This was awesome.
All right. Keep up the great work. All right. This is Alan Schimmel. We're at TechStrong TV. We're going to be right back with our next guest.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
With the COVID-19 pandemic, it is important to protect yourself and others from spreading the virus. Prevention and personal safety is key. Here are the top ways you can protect yourself and others. Wash your hands often with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Avoid touching your face. Practice social distancing and avoid high-risk potential people. If you are showing symptoms, stay at home. If you must go out, wear a face mask. Always cover coughs and sneezes with a tissue or use the inside of your elbow. Clean and sanitize frequently touched surfaces daily. Together, we can prevent this pandemic.
Okay, back here in the studio, getting ready for our next segment. Our guest in this segment is the Chief Data Officer for Unravel. His name is Sandeep Udamchandani. And Sandeep, really, we had a good conversation that lays out kind of where data fits into the hierarchy, if you will. Because at the end of the day, it's all about the data, right? And sometimes we forget that. We get so wrapped up in our infrastructure and our applications, but at the core of it is data. Sandeep's going to give us a quick reminder of that, talk about the current state of data, APM, data ops, and as well as, what effect the COVID situation is having on it. So let's now go to our conversation with Unravel CDO Sandeep Udachamandani.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on this segment of TechStrong TV. My guest for this segment is Sandeep Udachamandani of Unravel. Sandeep, I hope I didn't mess your name up too badly. I apologize if I did, but welcome to TechStrong TV.
Hey, Alan, thanks for having me. And actually, you were spot on. You get 10 of 10. You were spot on with the last name.
When you do this for a living, Sandeep, you learn to pronounce people's names. I mean, I didn't used to be very good at it, but you get used to it. Anyway, Sandeep, you are with Unravel, and I think a good portion of our audience might be familiar, or at least they've heard of Unravel. They may not be 100% sure of what Unravel does and where it plays. But why don't we start with that and what your position with Unravel is?
Absolutely, Alan. So I'm the Chief Data Officer and the VP of Engineering at Unravel. And I can tell you very briefly about what Unravel does.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Perfect. When you think about the whole big data space, and with all the excitement we are seeing around applying machine learning, applying AI, everything depends on data, right? So Unravel really is what we refer to as it's a self-serve APM, application performance management for big data, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, what that translates to is, if you look at my background, I have an experience that has 2 decades of experience, both building enterprise software as well as running them at scale, right? So I've seen both the sides of the world. And the biggest problem today is enterprises are data rich, but information poor, right? They have lots of data, but do you really have the insights? And when you get to the bottom of it, what it translates to is, how do you run these massive pipelines, right? Pipelines either on-prem or in the cloud using really a plethora of technologies, all the way from query engines to NoSQL stores to data transformation, data validation, the whole shebang, so to speak, right? And that is where Unravel comes in. Unravel basically does 4 things, right? First, it provides a single pane of glass across your entire pipeline, be it on-prem or in the cloud. Second, it provides you detailed analysis. So it takes all the raw data, the millions and millions of telemetry information that is gathering from infrastructure, platform, job, cluster level, combines and correlates to tell you what's going on in simple words. Like, this pipeline is running slow because of interference, or, you are underpowered here. The third thing it does is recommendations. So not just stopping at saying that this is where things are, but actually telling you how to fix it. So it will actually tell you in your Spark, go ahead and increase the number of executors or change the the memory allocation, so on and so forth. So again, that's a very concrete, actionable piece. And the last piece here is what we refer to as auto-tuning, where if you put it in auto-tuning mode, it actually profiles the job as it runs and makes it better and better by adjusting the parameters. So really, in some sense, if you think of the analogy of a self-driving car, right? Unravel makes your data pipelines self-driving. And coming from the other side of the world, I can tell you, with thousands of pipelines run every day, cost, performance, root cause analysis, and really ensuring that the end users are able to self-serve themselves, huge issues. So that's really where Unravel's head is at.
Absolutely. So a couple of questions or follow-ups on that, Sandeep, I wanted to talk about. So one of the terms we've been hearing bandied about a lot lately is the term data ops, right? Which means a lot. It means different things to different people, is what I found out. But and some companies are trying to make that term theirs, and some of the analyst firms are putting out definitions. Would you say Unravel is a data ops company? Is that part of the mission there, or what does data ops mean to you?
Excellent question, Alan. So I'll basically give you a long answer, and then I'll summarize it for you, right? like you said, data ops means different things to different people, right? Having spent years in running large data platform deployments, what data ops translates to me is what I define as time to insights. That is, I have raw data sitting, right? It's in my transactional databases. It's in multiple different silos. How much time does it take to extract an insight in the form of a business dashboard, a machine learning model, an ML model that is serving my product, right? And if you break the problem down in that form, it translates into multiple different steps that need to come together, right? These steps essentially broadly fall in 4 buckets, right? How do you discover the data, right? Because if you cannot discover, nothing really can be done. How do you prep the data? Because data is never in a form that can easily be consumed, right? A lot of quality issues, outliers, missing values. How do you then build and how do you operationalize, right? Building essentially is the part where you'll be writing queries, you'll be writing transformations. And operationalize essentially is all about how do you run this at scale? How do you ensure that this delivers the SLA, this delivers the correctness that you're looking for? Now, if you look at this end-to-end journey, right? Again, each piece by itself, there are lots of different companies, lots of open source activities going on in each of the spaces. Unravel, and this is all data ops. When you think of data ops, this is really what data ops is, the entire journey. Within this, there are 2 parts, the build and the operationalize piece, right? Which are, I would basically say, take the most amount of time. Because it's one thing to do the initial discovery, do the prep. Prep is about data wrangling, wrangle the data, make it available. But then when you put it as a pipeline in terms of something that runs every day, my inventory of products sold, my customers that signed up on my SaaS portal, right? This is information that is getting pulled, modified, run, and then eventually shows up either a dashboard, which a business analyst or a marketing campaign manager will look at. So the phases of building and operationalize is where Unravel plays in. And what makes the problem really difficult is that this is the part where there is no, I would say, heuristics, no single answer. How do you get your query to run faster? Or let's say if your query stopped running, what's going on, right? There are hundreds and thousands of different things that are going on. And how do you speed up this part of the process, which is where Unravel really plays heavily in the data ops space. So short answer, yes, that's totally our mission. And, we take on parts of the problem. In fact, one of our founders who comes from academia really has spent more than a decade looking at how do you optimize, how do you run queries optimally, more of an expert in a box.
Excellent. My other observation and sort of area of discussion is that, when we look at at some point someone will write a history of this, right? When we look at the history of let's say, the agile to DevOps, lean IT movement, when we look at the history of technology over the last 10 years and going out the next 3 to 5 years, I think what we'll see is, look, there was a tremendous amount initially of focus on the infrastructure. What hardware, virtualization, or containerization, or database, like what were the vessels where we kept data, right? But not for the data sake. It was all about the infrastructure, right? We had a ton of infrastructure experts. Secure the infrastructure, scalable infrastructure, all of these things. Then there was a really big emphasis on software development, application development, application security, CI/CD pipelines, right? Repositories of code and moving this all through. And we have done wonders in, look, we have companies that are deploying hundreds of times a day, right? Continuously. Testing, continuous. Great. Now, all of a sudden, if we look at the timeline like they always do with human evolution, right, on a clock, a 24-hour clock, at 3 minutes to midnight, right before we go through this, all of a sudden when someone wakes up and says, "Wait a second, it's about the data, dummy," right? The data is the crown jewels. The data, we do all of this stuff for the data, to be able to collect the data, analyze the data, use the data. That's what everything else kind of, that's the black hole at the center of the galaxy that this is all spinning around. Why do you think it took? Why did we go, why wasn't the data aspect of it paramount to begin with, you think?
So great question. I think there are two aspects here, Alan. Firstly, when you think about, as we thought about infrastructure, as we thought about building blocks, IT, this all came in the bucket of IT. And guess what? IT was always a cost center, right?
Yeah.
It was never really seen as a differentiator. It's something I need to run the business, right? Now, basically what has happened, if you look at pretty much what has happened over the last decade, look at all the companies that have evolved in the space in general, right? From the Airbnbs to the Ubers of the world. And really what you see happening there is that the differentiation, and this is now pretty much caught up with every vertical, the differentiation is what you know from the data, right? And that is where IT became no longer a cost center, but really became a differentiator, right? How do I, sitting on millions of customers, do something differently to ward off a new incumbent, right? Because I know exactly how customers are using the product, which markets, which sectors, what pain points they are solving. So I would basically say this is the awareness that has just come in, right? From a history standpoint, I love the way you put the fact that, okay, how would we write the history of this? Here's my take on how you would write the data history, right? So 2 decades back, data, we always knew that we need to do something with data, right? And 2 decades back, we call this data warehousing, right? Where the idea was the transactional databases are running my records, interacting with the customer, what you call as OLTP, right? And once a day, once at night, or during the week, you aggregated all this information in a warehouse and ran a massive report that was more a retrospective report. It told you, how did the sales do last week? Which markets did well, right? Did we meet our quotas? Now, fast forward, and this is where when you had data warehouses, there were 2 or 3 well-defined players. So you pretty much had, those choices, those vendors to buy things from, right? Now, fast forward to what has happened today, right? The components of the data warehouse are still required. You still need a persistence layer. You need a catalog which tracks the information. You need query processing, right? You need a mechanism to serve the data that is generated, right? And you really need to optimize the flow of information. And in some sense, the data warehouse has exploded today. And all those building blocks, those blocks are still required, but just that the amount of choices are now multiplicative, right? Because I can always get a catalog combined with some query engine. There are tons of choices of query engine, be it Hive, Hive on Tez, Hive on Spark, Spark, Presto. The list just continues, right? And each cloud environment gives you a multiplicative combination that you can, like if you're on Google versus Amazon versus Microsoft, the world looks very different. So that's the history, Alan. If we really step back, what we as an industry are grappling with is, okay, how do I run my pipelines with these components around and do it seamlessly in a one-stop shop? So, and these are the choices that make it very interesting, very segmented market. No 2 customers have the exact same footprint in terms of the technologies they use.
Excellent. Okay, so let's fast forward to today. We're all in shelter in place. We're dealing with a worldwide pandemic. But yet, the data marches on. Right? We're still collecting data. We have to analyze that data. Excuse me. And we need to use that data, right? To keep our businesses functioning, keep the lights on. And we need to start planning about what happened. It's not going to be this way forever, God willing. What do we do? What is the new normal going to look like? Where are we going to go? So let's first look at the present. Sandeep, what do you, from your seat as a chief data officer, and there are other chief data officers, right, at many companies. What are you seeing here as the challenges? As maybe, sometimes every black cloud has a silver lining. Is there maybe a silver lining here that you're seeing? Interested in your thoughts that.
Sure, Alan. So in fact, I spend a lot of time with fellow chief data officers, and there are definitely some common themes that come up, right? So firstly, any way you slice the current pandemic, it's definitely unexpected. No one really was prepared in any shape and form in terms of something of this proportion, hitting the industry this fast, right? And clearly, what this means, specifically if you think from a chief data officer's standpoint, is that a lot of data-driven insights, that drive the company, right? When you think of data-driven insights, all the way from sales, marketing, customer support, products, also innovation within the product itself. That is, these days, when you go to any tool, there are ML models that are helping you predict, right? All those essentially now become interesting and questionable with respect to, are they accurate, right? So there's a term that is used in the ML community called data drift, right? Where what you're referring to as data drift is when the properties of the data have fundamentally shifted away, so that the model needs to be completely retrained, right? So now if you put that hat on, what it's translating to is, how do I continue to make data-driven decisions, right? And it's extremely critical because given uncertainty, if you start taking random, I would say, guesses, the search space is infinite, right? So you need basis. You need to understand which parts of the market are recovering, what exactly is happening based on the kind of business you're in. And this is translating now into an increased focus on, how do I build insights faster, really fast? So business agility now is, okay, let's throw away some of those models. Let's throw away the way we have been looking at stuff, because this is a new normal now. And the key really is, okay, how do I now build out the right parameters in my queries? How do I build out the right ETL transformations? How do I build out this eventually in a model and consume? So there's a lot of focus on that aspect, which is the business agility aspect. The other dimension to the whole mix, I would basically say, is cost, right? When you think about what this means for businesses, again, it's no surprise that every business will feel some impact, right? When it comes to the net result, bottom line, top line. And how do you optimize the cost? Because data infrastructure costs are most significant. Any services you run either on-prem or in the cloud. So it's really a combination of, how do I improve my costs and really sort of weed out inefficiencies as I'm running these at scale, and at the same time improve my agility, improve the speed with which, my productivity with which my data analysts, my data scientists are able to put these pipelines from idea to prototype to production in record time, right? And those are now becoming, I would say, the new focus areas that CDOs across are double downing on.
Excellent. A good answer, Sandeep. Thank you. So, whether it's 2 months from now, 4 months from now, the end of the year, the beginning of the new year, hopefully this is behind us. We go back to our normal, whatever that'll be. I don't think you can never set foot in the same stream twice, right? It's not going to go back the way it was before. What do you see as sort of the big changes in the world of data ops, data management that we'll see when things do go to this new normal?
That's an interesting question. Firstly,
it's a loaded one, I realize. But go ahead, take explain on it.
Definitely. So firstly, I honestly wish that we're out of this soon and totally getting to a world where, like you said, things may not exactly be how we define normal originally, but really at a point where some of the basic aspects are taken care of. Now, what this basically translates to, there are a couple of different areas and directions where this could evolve, right? I think firstly, if you put on the hat from a technology standpoint, right, I would basically think about the technology areas, and these are some of the, if you think about how companies prioritize, right, data definitely is becoming more of a must-have, right? And what I mean by this is that the only way to really win through the uncertainties that are going on, right, is to combine, information. And then there's also proprietary data sources. So now you may not have all the data, but there's a lot of market data available as well. So how do you leverage it to your advantage? And you leverage it better than your competitor, right? Because even your competitors will be pretty much facing the same uncertainty, right? How do you find those pockets of profitability? How do you find those pockets where this might be the time to win the market share back, right? You can always think of these as opportunities as well. So on the technology side, I definitely feel that the industry has been talking about data-driven, and every company kind of has been trying to incorporate this culture of data-driven. So this will accelerate those aspects and investments there, right? With respect to what I refer to as the people side, right? As people, skilled engineers playing different personas, different roles come in. One of the dimensions I see today is that when you think about the different roles, and to give an example, think of a data scientist role and a data engineer role. A data scientist focuses on building the model, right? They'll take some sample data, build it out, prove that this is possible, right? And then they'll hand it over to a data engineer. So in a funny way, it's like throwing it over the wall model, right? You take the prototype and say, data engineer, productionize this for me, run this at scale, and ensure that the SLAs are met, right? And there's again a lot of things that happen there. Now, as people get more remote, and as teams have to operate in that form in an extended period, right? One of the aspects I see is that more of the full stack, or there's a term floating around called full stack data scientists, right? That will become more and more popular, which is the ability to not just build and prototype, but then really leveraging tools and frameworks that will help you operationalize and productionize this all by yourself, right? So imagine the back and forth that happens today, because data engineers don't understand the context. They'll be like, what does this attribute mean? What are we trying to do? And data scientists, they understand the business model, they understand the attributes of data, and they have to spend a lot of time going to and fro. Oftentimes the ball is dropped. So tools and frameworks which can really make remote working more efficient in this context will get much more relevant, and really enabling users to go all the way, right? Rather than kind of the throw over the wall model, which I only refer to it. I think the last piece in the puzzle is really the process aspect, right? And when I think about processes today, the processes are really structured around a world where, again, you have years and years of normal understanding of what normal meant, customer behavior, so on and so forth. How do we now transform our processes here? Like, is the process now to take on bigger risks? Like, for instance, as we are thinking about making predictions, what kind of error rates are acceptable? How do we enrich our data, right? How should we be thinking about, in general, the whole integration with our applications? You were giving some examples earlier. That, hey, it was always the data. We were focusing a lot on the applications and the infra. So I think the third bucket is the most fluid bucket in terms of what it means to processes. But definitely from a technology and the people standpoint, I think there's a clear emergence that we're starting to see.
Excellent. So, Deep, when we started this interview, before we started recording, I told you the 20 minutes goes very quickly. We're probably closer to 25 minutes now. So we're way over time. We're going to have to call an end to this one. Maybe we can have you back on and we could talk more about data. I'd love to maybe get another chief data officer, another CDO, and maybe we could do a little panel on that. That would be great. But for now, listen, stay well. Best of luck with Unravel. And we'll speak to you again soon.
Absolutely. Alan, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, same here. Stay safe and hang in there.
Thank you. All right. Sandeep Udamchandani, Chief Data Officer, Unravel, here on TechStrong TV. This is Alan Schimmel. We'll be right back with our next guest.
Right now, software is more important than ever. It is powering the online services enabling teams to connect, collaborate, and work remotely, and allowing innovation to continue to get to market rapidly. CloudBees offers software delivery automation solutions to support all remote teams, and you can use the best-in-class tools you need to get the job done. CloudBees helps you build stuff that matters. Visit cloudbees.com to learn more.
Okay, everyone. Well, it's that time where we go back into our archives. And I usually, we pick them from either our digitalanarchist.com site, which I think has over 1,000 videos now. And you can check that out there. Or sometimes I'll go back even further into our YouTube DevOps TV, all one word, channel, where we also have probably over another 1,000 videos. And so I went back into the YouTube channel today to grab something from the DevOps Enterprise Summit in Vegas in 2019. And it's Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor, conducted this interview. And it features my friend Damon Edwards, founder of Rundeck, Cornelia Davis, who's just brilliant. We've featured her a few times on TechStrong TV, and Tom Limoncelli, who's also not a slouch. And the three of them, along with Charlene, had a really great conversation around next-gen ops. And I think, it's still relevant. It held up really well. A year later, it rocks. I'd like you to check out this this conversation. Hope you enjoy it. And I'll be back with the news after that.
I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at DevOps.com, DevOps TV, and I'm here at DevOps Enterprise Summit, Las Vegas, 2018, doing some great interviews and meeting some really fascinating people. And I have another group of really smart people next to me. I've got Damon Edwards, I've got Cornelia Davis, and I've got Tom Limoncelli. So we're going to talk a little bit about IT operations and next-gen ops in general. These guys are stellar stars in the IT operations space, so hopefully they'll be able to give me a little bit of maybe insight into what's happening into IT operations. So Cornelia, let's start with you. When we're talking about next-gen ops, we're kind of obviously looking forward a little bit. What are some of the things that kind of you're seeing that's maybe perhaps shaping the IT operations space in the next year or so?
So it's funny, when you were just introducing us and you mentioned that we're, have a lot of experience in the IT ops space. I actually don't. I am a developer by background. Okay. And I have been working for Pivotal for the last 5 years and realized very early on in that journey, I work on platforms. And theoretically, those platforms were for the developer. I work on a PaaS platform. But I learned very, very quickly that it's not actually a developer platform, that it's an ops platform just as much as dev. And so I say that in answer to your query, in that I believe that we are going to continue to see that transformation in ops. is I spend a lot of time out with customers, and I still find that most customers still have the traditional plan, build, run, which is really more around IT systems, and then the developers are yet another group that's off to the side. I think that what we will continue to see is we will continue to see the processes and the technologies to support the fragmentation of operations, so that it's not just some IT group that is doing ops. It's actually the dev teams that do ops. The IT groups are going to continue doing ops, but they're going to do ops for a different layer. I think fundamentally that's the way that I would sum it up, is that we'll start to see layers of operations where it used to be operations was done kind of holistically by one group.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, and I think that highlights is there's two transformations going on. One is the sort of, I guess we call it the infrastructure, but infrastructure meaning everything. It's an architecture discussion. It's kind of the cloud native, right, as the moniker. It's gone on to that, and that's kind of how you get things like Cornelia was talking about coming from, how the platform, right, used to be kind of some part of the platform was an ops concern, some part of the platform was a dev concern, and every once in a while we would try to glue them together, right? Usually in a production launch. How the rethinking on that for these cloud native architectures is changing, fundamentally changing the nature of operations. And then I think there's the realization on the other side, which is all this pressure from the go sort of DevOps, digital transformation. And then at the same time, everything's getting a lot more serious because it's becoming a bigger part of the business. That's so lock it down more. It's kind of ops is being squeezed, which means we have to change how we work. We're never going to move fast enough under these old siloed command and control, driven ways of working. So now we see much more kind of lean or agile and kind of inspired ways of working. A lot of what Tom's talk was about today was about how do you start to inject these things into an organization. So I think that is kind of the big transformation going on in operations, is the architecture is totally changing and the operating model or the way of working is totally changing. So you can take advantage of all that new architecture stuff. Otherwise, you're going to be kind of left behind.
And a lot of it is about new skill development, both on the dev side and the operations side. And it's scary. A lot of operations people say, well, I'm not a coder, and you say we're going to automate our operations. Do I have a place? And they absolutely do, because operations automation is really just taking what you know already and doing it a little bit differently. But that's a new skill that needs to be learned.
Yeah, and it's funny, you get this funny thing where developers are like, yes, we get to, we want to take control. We want to get, we want to, kind of get in there. It's a lot of the no ops sort of idea was like, yes, this urge to finally, we don't have to wait for ops. We're going to take over. And then they get in there and they're like, take it back. I don't want it. I don't want it. Right? Oops,
I've heard a lot of developers say things like, I don't want to do any operations because they think DevOps means I have to carry a pager. Right.
Right.
But
well, let me say there's a couple of what's new in operations, or the next generation of operations. First of all, it's businesses acknowledging that operations exist, because in a lot of companies, a lot of big companies, they think that the goal is writing the code. And what they're learning is that for decades, what they didn't realize was the code gets written once, but you run it every day, and that makes operations millions of times more important or more pressing than development.
Ops is the business, right?
That's
where you make your money is right there. I mean, yes,
right.
You have to have the right parts, the right, the special sauce comes from development. You have to, but it has to run. Otherwise, you're fundamentally not making money. Full stop. Right.
Right. It used to be if the system was down, that's okay because we run payroll once a month. But you can't say, well, the website's going to be only up from 9 to 5. It's a transition to a 24/7 environment. So as a result, there's much more emphasis on how do we scale the people we have through automation. How do we become less reactionary? So we don't want to monitor to know when things are down. We want to monitor to know when things are sick so that they can be fixed ahead of time and they never do go down.
Gotcha.
I want to circle back to something that you said, Damon, as well, around cloud native architectures.
Okay.
Because cloud native architectures, and that's especially coming from a development background, I spend a lot of time thinking about that. I'm actually writing a book around cloud native architectures. But it's a cyclical thing. The cloud native architectures are what's enabling us to refactor the way that we organize our dev and operations groups. And it's also the need for reorganizing and gaining efficiencies around development and operations that's driving the existence of cloud native architectures. And I find that very fascinating that we've got this cycle. And I think I was just chatting with a colleague of mine last week, and we were talking about some technology. We were talking about event logs. We were talking about Kafka in particular. And he had seen a presentation that Neha, who's the CTO of Confluent, had given a couple of weeks before. And he said, I watched a presentation and I was like, yeah, I was talking about this stuff at TIBCO 20 years ago. And we chatted a little bit about that. And one of the points that I made is that the context is different. And it's the context is the architecture is different. The application architectures are different. So the way that we're doing messaging across things, well, the components are different. That part of the context is different. And then again, this need to be able to deliver a digital transformation. Every company is a digital company, and they constantly need to be delivering digital offerings. That's also driving changes in the way that messaging, in this particular case, we were talking about messaging, how that happens.
It's interesting that we're talking about cloud native architectures in relation to IT operations, because you kind of think that because we are moving to a more cloud-based infrastructure, that maybe the need to have IT operations is a little bit less, or maybe their job roles are changing a little bit because of the fact that we've got both on-premises architectures and cloud-based architectures. Am I wrong in thinking that way, or is that something?
I think you're right. I think the difference is that people's jobs are moving up the stack. So it used to be people are managing the running cables, very low level parts of the stack, and now what's important in operations is more the application layer, and to do that well, you have to be integrated with the developers so that it's a collaborative environment, not a waterfall environment.
So it's more meaningful. Actually,
it's much more meaningful. Yeah. Your job, your role in a company is much more valuable when you're working at higher levels of the stack.
Well, it's like I think operations matters more. Like you're actually an operator. Right? I think that's kind of the difference. Is a lot of those lower level concerns that are abstracted away are kind of non-differentiating. A lot of setup type things, right? It's not even infrastructure built, it's like setup. It's like plug and key, rack and stack. We're worried about sort of managing lower level storage and things like that. Now it's like that frees you up. The emphasis is on operating, because Tom said these are 24 by forever services, right. And it is the business. That is literally the business. It's not some system that supports some paper trail that you did before, or the customer can always call back tomorrow, take their order on paper. But I mean, literally, this is the 24 by forever business, and so you have to learn how to operate those complex systems. And this can focus. You can focus on that. So there's no less operations happening. It's just happening higher up the stack and in a more interesting way.
Right. In fact, studies have found that people don't go to websites that are down.
Well, that makes sense. It makes total sense.
But also, not only do they not go to those websites, but they...
I'm going to Google. I don't believe you on that one.
Okay, well, so it turns out...
not only source there.
But when the website comes back up, that they don't come back to that website. Right. They've already gone to a competitor, and they stay there.
Yeah, that's right. That's right, because they're going to order pizza for the Super Bowl, and if the pizza ordering site is down for the Super Bowl, well, the Super Bowl has gone and passed.
Right.
So,
and now they have set up an account at that other pizzeria, and they're just going to start ordering from them from now on.
Yeah, this whole thing about moving up the stack, one of the things that I find very interesting is that I spend part of my time in Oregon, in Central Oregon, and there are some data centers out in Central Oregon, in Prineville, just kind of east of Bend. And I was chatting with somebody once who had moved from kind of, I think either Dallas or Austin. I think Dallas, because there's a fair bit of, I think they had worked for EMC or something like that before. And they heard that I believe is Amazon and Facebook, they all have, several of those big companies have data centers in Prineville. And they said, well, we moved out here because I thought I would get my next IT job there. And they moved out to Oregon and found that, in fact, the IT jobs aren't there. The data centers are there, but they're these dark data centers.
Yeah.
They don't have anybody who's doing IT systems the way that they used to do IT systems in Texas.
Right. You need 2 employees at a data center, a person and a dog, and the person is to make sure that no one comes in, and the dog is there to, no, I'm sorry, the person is there to feed the dog, and the dog is there to make sure that the person doesn't go into the data center.
Nobody gets in.
Right.
Yep, exactly.
So in that respect, then the dog is more important than the person.
Oh, I wouldn't say that about my friends that do work at data centers, but
you know, there's another really important skill that I think those skills that people have had around IT operations and doing kind of the metaphorical plugging in of cables, and it's not just plugging in of cables, it's, you know, again, coming from a development background, I could not configure a firewall. You don't want me, you want to keep, you need that dog to keep me away from the firewall, right? Nothing good comes of that. But those individuals that have known how to configure firewalls, we don't want them to day in and day out work off of a queue to configure the firewall, because there's that delay in the ticketing system. But we need that expertise to have them help to set up the automation and to set up a policy framework around being able to now, hey, if I'm deploying an app, I'm pushing an app into this particular area, there's some automation set up that takes all of that knowledge that that person had around configuring the firewall and automates that. So we do need those folks to help us stand up those platforms. The platforms do the automation, but we need that skill set to configure those platforms the right way.
Yeah.
You know, good.
And those people often resist that transition, but what they find is because they resist for many reasons. It's scary, change is scary, but also they think they're going to lose their job.
Right.
But instead, their job becomes more valuable because now they're not spending all their day click, click, click. They're working higher up the stack and deciding, what are these policies?
Yep.
So we were talking about the architecture differences and sort of ways of working difference, and this is where SRE comes in, is when the change in the ways of working. And one of the fundamental things is that's been brilliant about it is it's finally given a name to what Cornelia was talking about, is this word toil. And the idea is it's work that fundamentally doesn't add enduring value to the organization. It's repetitive. It's probably rote. It should be automated, or it's automatable. A machine could do it, or a robot could do it if it was the cables. And it scales linearly with the service. With a billion users, we're going to have that many number of people doing these services. And they're like, that doesn't add value to the organization. What does add value to the organization is engineering work. And that doesn't just mean like I'm a software developer. It could be all sorts of things, but I'm taking an engineering mindset to saying it takes work that takes human creativity and adds enduring value to the company. And this kind of switch, this new way of working, is saying that, hey, we need to track that because we want to have our people working a maximum amount of there's a maximum limit of the amount of toil we want to accept. I know the Google, benchmark is 50%, but the idea being that we always want to have extra time for engineering work, because then the engineering work could be creating automation to get rid of more toil, or actually doing things that move the business forward. And these people are discovering as they get through this, if you free up these operators' time, they have all this knowledge of how things actually work and how you can improve the stability and the reliability and the speed of the system. So therefore, if we free up that engineering work, there's all this human capital that's being created in the organization, and they just find more to do, right? And the business moves forward. So that's one of the major shifts of this kind of new operations ways of working we're talking about, is like that idea was not the old way. The old way was, oh great, these operators, if they're not doing 100% toil, 110% at all times, they're not efficient, and we should make them more efficient, and it's just doesn't move the business forward. In fact, it makes things worse because you're in a spiral because you don't have the engineering work to get rid of that toil, so you're never going to get anywhere.
Yeah, when I used to work in like IT help desk environments, they talk about for every X employees that we hire, we had to add one system administrator. And that kind of linear growth is what people try to do in operations, but it's actually very different. It's more like 6 people should be able to run a service, and no matter how big that service gets, whether it's 20 million users or 50,000 users. And the Google benchmark is 6 employees can run a service, or SREs can run a service. The only change is if you need follow the sun coverage, then it's 5 times the number of time zones.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you remember
and that's a much better scaling model for your business.
Do you remember the old metric? It was always like systems administrators to servers. Like remember the network world that had like the centerfold with someone's network diagram and all that, like all those days. And every product was always bragging about certain systems administrators to servers, right? And that is the perfect example of, because those jobs were based in toil, and it was scaling linearly. And now these kind of the SRE sort of way, it's a lot of different things, but people kind of SRE moniker goes around it. they've broken that. They've decoupled that to where it's about, running the service and about automating that toil, so we're not stuck in that toil trap.
One of the metrics that we use at Pivotal with our customers, because again we sell a platform, is the ratio that we look at is the number of platform individuals, so people who are responsible for creating and operating the platform, relative to the number of consumers of that platform, so the number of developers that are enabled.
Okay.
And that's a super interesting metric, is to say, oh, I can run the platform with 6 people, and that's enabling 1,500 or 2,000 developers, because those developers are of course creating the digital offerings that are driving your business.
So it sounds like, in broad strokes, IT operations looking ahead is going to be a lot more automated. We're going to rely on automation a lot more, and it's going to be add even greater value to the organization. So those are 2 things I can.
And it's layered.
Right. I'd add one fine point to that, which is it's going to be more automated to elevate the operators.
Right.
I think that's kind of the thing where it goes wrong. Once you get into the reality of it, it's like, oh no, like automation, it's like a superpowers, or it's like a mechanized suit, and I don't know what video game that is, right? But it's like, it's that idea, like the automation is there because then it either clears things away, away the noise, or force multiplies their attention or whatever it is, or their, the number of hands they have. But it's fundamentally organizations that are very successful in this operations transformation. The automation elevates the human beings. It makes their humans, the human capital, to use the flowery term, right?
Automation assists people, it doesn't replace people.
That's a simpler way to say it. That's why he writes books.
All right then. All right, Damon, Cornelia, and Tom, thank you so much for taking the time and talking with me about IT operations. It's fascinating, and I think we're going to see a lot of movement in the space next year. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Elsa, you're all over the place.
How am I supposed to do anything when she's over here just doing her own thing?
Okay, well, maybe if Dan played more than just one string, we'd all be more on the same page.
Are you out of your mind? Okay, I do the E string. That's my job.
Isn't there an easier way to do this? There
wish.
has to be.
I literally just suggested something.
Right?
Nobody ever listens to me, though,
It's
so...
ridiculous every time.
When your team's not on the same page, things can get weird, fast. Don't make your DevOps team live like this.
El tutto tu tempo es finito, Dan!
See? It's like we're not speaking the same language. I'm out.
GitLab is the only single application for the entire DevOps lifecycle, making sure your teams are all on the same page.
Do you know how to play the E string?
I can learn.
We're back in the studio, and it's time in our show where we give you the news, as usual, just a smattering of the headlines across Security Boulevard, Container Journal, and DevOps.com. But please visit the sites to get the full Monty of what we've got going on. There's a ton of great stuff up there. But just to pick out a few from Security Boulevard for today, top 5 tactical steps for a new CISO. Whether you're a new CISO or an old CISO, I recommend this one. Even if you're not a CISO, I recommend this one. I think there's good 5 common sense steps there of things that need to get done as you're implementing a security plan. Also on Security Boulevard, we have a survey reveals security overconfidence during COVID-19. Absolutely, one of the 7 deadly sins, right? So don't be overconfident. There's a pandemic of cyber stuff going on around COVID, and it's not a kind of time to let your guard down, unfortunately, as we're dealing with everything else we all have to deal with. On Container Journal, I think we mentioned the Skylar DB adds operator for database on Kubernetes is a good one. Also, Trend Micro identifies common Kubernetes security issues. So now we're starting to see the trends, the Trend Micros, the McAfee's, semantics of the world jumping into the Kubernetes security configuration market. And so they're identifying some common security issues here. And then we also have up on Container Journal a new survey that sees a spike in container Kubernetes adoption on public cloud. Well, hello, Captain Obvious. But there's more to it than the headline. Look at the story. You might be surprised at what's out there. Over on DevOps.com, got a couple of articles for you to highlight. Number one, 4 things to do when running the IoT zoo. Look, the fact is IoT devices are just proliferating by the millions, billions, and you're going to need some automation. You're going to need DevOps to run this zoo, as the article calls it. So take a look at that one. It's a pretty good one, and I think you'll find it useful. Also, we have the folks over at CloudBees and the CloudBees feature flagging tool, which of course they did an acquisition of feature flags last year. They've added some new features in there. They also have added the ability to run the feature flag tool not as a SaaS or cloud-based service, but on-prem on your own private cloud. We have a good interview coming up, I think, next Monday with Mo Planowitz from CloudBees, who's going to talk about that. So stay tuned for that on Monday. But until then, you can read the article to get a preview. And then the folks at Datadog doing amazing things. Datadog security monitoring goes GA. So, this is something I've been looking forward to for some time, and that is the guys like at Datadog and SignalFX and some of the others that would, they were doing application monitoring. It only made sense that you would have security monitoring integrated into there. The question was, were they going to do their own security monitoring? Were they just going to integrate other security monitoring tools, maybe do an acquisition and fold it in? Anyway, Datadog is now having their own security monitoring, and that's in their general availability. So good news there. Good work by Datadog. That's going to be it on the news today. You can go, as I said, please go check out the sites, devops.com, securityboulevard.com, containerjournal.com. Ton of stuff up there. But now, let's put the computers away. We're going to go over to Jeremy Jones for Working from Home from Jeremy. And, a lot of thanks to Jeremy. He comes in, films this, does the workouts, thinks about it, puts it together. It's hard. We all don't have weights and treadmills and everything at home to work on. The gyms, for the most part, are closed, and even if they're open, who the heck wants to go there and risk getting sick? So Jeremy's doing these workouts for you. We hope you like them. So here's Jeremy Jones, Working from Home Fitness.
Hey guys, it's Jeremy with Media Ops, back for another workout from home. We've got something a little bit different set up for you guys today. So if you've missed any of our previous episodes, you can always go back and watch them on TechStrong.TV. You could also find them on Roku. You can find them on Amazon Fire, as well as Apple TV. So if you miss any, go back, check those out. These can be used over and over again. But what we've got today is something a little bit different. We've got a core workout designed specifically for your core. So before we get into that, there's something I wanted to talk to you guys about. Obviously with everything going on with COVID, a lot of us are inside a lot more. I think it's really important to try to get out as much as you can. Obviously you want to be safe, practice social distancing, but get out for a walk. Take a 15-minute walk in the morning, one midday, one in the afternoon, weather permitting. Get out, be active. Get out, get some fresh air, get those steps in. That'll do wonders for burning calories and helping you maintain your weight. So I just wanted to go over that, something simple that you could do on an everyday basis that we should all be doing, quite honestly. And so for today's workout, we've got another timed workout. We've done a couple of these already. I've shown you a Tabata, I've shown you an Imam, and every minute on the minute workout. So what we have today is kind of a modification. So we're gonna go for my beginners to intermediate. You're gonna go 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. For my more advanced, you're gonna go 40 seconds on, 20 seconds off. And so we're gonna go in progression through these exercises, all working the core. So we're gonna start out with leg raises, move on to bicycles, go directly into plank, Supermans, and then we're gonna do side crunches. So we'll go left side, then we'll go right side. So let me jump into the workout. We'll go through all the exercises. All right, guys, so need just a couple of things for a core workout. If you wanted something, we've got a harder surface here, so I've got the towel that I had from a couple episodes ago. If you have a yoga mat or exercise mat, that works great because we're gonna be on the ground for most of these. You also need some type of device to time yourself. I've got my watch here. You could go with the Fitbit or any type of watch, anything that has a timer on it. So as soon as I hit this, we're gonna go directly into the workout. So I'm gonna get ready and start. Remember, with our leg raises, we're gonna have our hands underneath the small of our back, raising our feet. So I'm gonna hit the timer now, and time has started. So this is gonna be continuous, non-stop. I'm gonna go for 40 seconds. And then I'm gonna give myself about 20 seconds of rest. While I'm resting, I'm gonna transition into my next exercise. Okay, we've got about 20 seconds down, 20 seconds to go. Good, you wanna be nice and controlled. I recommend resting your head so you don't strain your neck too much with these. I was keeping it up because I wanna keep an eye on the time here. Good, and 20 seconds. Now, if you wanted something to kind of keep loose in between, you could always start doing bridges in between. Nice way to get a little bit of rest in between. So next up, we're gonna be doing our bicycles. So bicycles, I'm gonna incorporate a little bit of rotation into it. So I'm gonna elevate my feet up, rotate elbow to the opposite knee. Screen's going dark on me, so I gotta keep hitting it. Good, about 20 seconds in. That's 3, 2, and rest. Good. Every time you throw that rotation in, throws a nice little wrinkle. All right, guys, for our plank, we've got a couple variations. For my beginners, you can always go yoga plank. I'm gonna be doing it from my forearms. So I've got another about 5 seconds here. And I'm gonna go get ready and drop it down into plank. The important thing about plank is keeping those hips down. The further up you go, the easier it is. So you really wanna try to keep those hips down. Resting, you don't want to be on your elbows, you want to have it across your forearms. Another little tip, the wider your feet go, the more difficult it is. So if you want to keep your feet together, it makes it just a little bit easier. Good, so I've got about 10 seconds left. Good, 2, and 1. So I'm just gonna fall right down because I'm already in position for my Supermans. This is gonna work my lower back, which a lot of people don't think about when they talk about core. They always want to think about the six pack and getting those abs, but definitely the lower back is important as well. So I'm gonna extend up and lower, extend up and lower. Notice my hands, my feet aren't touching the ground. I'm contracting the lower back. And as I come up, I'm gonna hold for a second and then lower. Obviously, you can see why they call these Supermans. Good. Up, contract, hold, and release. Good, we've got about 10 more seconds to go. Remember, for my beginners, my intermediates, 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, and that's 40 seconds. Okay, now I'm gonna transition into my side crunches. So I'm back here, and I'm gonna put my left foot over my right knee. I'm gonna rotate over right elbow to touching my left knee. Going in 3, 2, and begin. I'm calling these left side crunches because my left knee is up. So that's why we're going left. Good. Make sure you come up and rotate. Come up and rotate over. See, I've got about 10 more seconds left. Good, last 3, 2, 1, and rest. So for my next side crunch, obviously I'm gonna just rotate over to the other side. Have about 10 seconds left. Really feeling it already, and I've got a few more rounds to go. All right, guys, and time has started. Come up and rotate. This is why it really helps if you have a clock up on the wall. About 15 seconds. And that's time. Okay, guys, that's round 1. So I'm gonna take a full 90 seconds in between. We're gonna go 4 rounds of these today, okay? So I'm gonna keep that timer going, and whenever it hits 60 to 90 seconds, you just restart. So again, for my beginners, intermediate, 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. My more advanced, 40 seconds on, 20 seconds off. All right, guys, this was a little bit more of a focused workout, so you can work your abs pretty much every day. So this is a nice core finisher. So if you go back, take a look at any of the other episodes, do a workout, employ the core finisher to the end of it. You have a strong core in no time. Very important because it really helps with functional strength, literally everything we do. All right, guys, if you have any feedback, if you have any questions, you can always email me, Jeremy, that's Jeremy at devops.com. Love to hear your feedback, love to hear your thoughts. All right, guys, stay safe. We'll see you soon.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
Hey, thanks, Jeremy. That was a great workout, man. I appreciate it. I hope you guys at home did as well. Reminder, if you didn't get a chance to do the workout, now you're busy, you can grab Jeremy's videos or watch them on TechStrong.tv or Digital Anarchist at your leisure, or maybe not at your leisure, but at your convenience to do your workouts. But now let's head over to Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor. And Charlene has 2 good interviews today I think you're going to enjoy. Charlene, take it away.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to TechStrong TV. I am Charlene O'Hanlon, managing editor at MediaOps, and I'm here now with John Towns, who's the executive director for science and technology at the National Center for Supercomputing Applications. That is quite a mouthful of a title. John, thanks so much for taking the time and talking with me today.
Quite welcome. Happy to be here.
Great, great. So, like to have a conversation with you about how supercomputing is being used to fight, or at least maybe make things a little bit easier during the COVID-19 pandemic. So can you, first of all, tell us a little bit about the NCSA and really what you guys are all about?
Sure. NCSA, the National Center for Supercomputing Applications, is at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. It's about coming on 35 years old as a center. It was initially established, funded by the National Science Foundation, and has continued to have significant funding from there. The center also has funding from other agencies supporting research across a broad range of scientific disciplines, but all underlying them needing computational resources, storage, analysis, those sorts of capabilities in order to move that science forward. So we have a lot of collaborations with researchers across universities across the U.S. and around the world, in which we provide that computational capability into their research workflow.
All right, great. So how involved in the COVID-19 pandemic and research projects related to that are you guys?
NCSA is quite involved, and I'm involved in a number of larger scale organizations. So I'm the PI and project director for an NSF-funded national scale project called EXCEED, which stands for the Extreme Science and Engineering Discovery Environment. We support on order of 2,000 projects a year from scientists across the US and around the world. During this period of time, EXCEED has joined up with some federal agencies and private companies who are offering computing and data resources to researchers who can further research on COVID-19 and also help us to address managing the pandemic itself. So I've been involved in that for some time. It feels a lot longer than it has been because it's been a fairly intense time, as many people know. But over the past 2 months, we've been taking proposals from researchers across a number of areas related to both the virus itself and in managing the pandemic, and providing access to resources and services and technical support in order to help them along in their work.
Okay, all right. So I imagine the COVID stuff has pretty much taken priority over other projects that you guys have working there at the NCSA.
That's true. We still continue to support a number of applications and scientific projects, but we are giving priority to these for obvious reasons. And we have projects going on in a number of areas that are looking promising and making good progress.
So what are some of those projects that you guys are?
So between what NCSA is doing and what's going on with these partners in this consortium I mentioned, we have about 76 projects that have been reviewed.
Wow.
Some have not passed the review process, but at this point we have 36 projects that are active on a number of different systems across the US. They tend to fall into 3 major categories. The first one is looking at the virus itself and its structure and how it attacks cells. The next is taking that information and designing drugs and antivirals that can help build a resistance or fight the virus itself. And the third category really is in patient treatment. How do we help manage resources for the healthcare system? How do we project the spread of the virus in various areas? And we're doing that down to a county level in the US at this point. So there's a lot of good information that's being generated through those mechanisms that are going to the CDC, to our political leaders, to healthcare systems and others to help advise on how to manage the pandemic itself.
So I imagine that you've also got some projects that are happening that are kind of directly and indirectly related to COVID that are more kind of societal or socioeconomic type projects that are going on?
There are some of those, and I expect that we will see more of those in the future. The focus initially has really been on addressing the pandemic itself and the short-term actions that we need to take as a society, but also the short-term scientific actions that need to be taken to help develop antivirals and other means of actually managing the virus itself.
Okay. All right. So the tracking work that you guys have been working on to kind of track the virus and measure whether, I think it's measuring whether social distancing is working. Is that kind of the idea?
There is a number of projects that are measuring the impact of social distancing and other methods for managing the spread of the virus. Yes.
Okay. All right. So how long does it take when you start a project like this before you actually get actionable intelligence that folks can take and say, well, we know for sure that social distancing is working because we have this data to prove it? I mean, what's the window for that?
Well, that's a really difficult question to answer, actually. And it turns out that it's difficult to conclusively say that social distancing is working.
Mm-hmm.
It's very easy to say when it's not.
Right.
As I've said to many people in a lot of discussions over the last weeks, imposing social distancing and other constraints in society is something that you can't wait until you notice the spread of the disease. It's too late by then. So it's very difficult for the public generally to comply with these because they don't see the reason for it. And so we see uneven adoption of these practices in the public, and it makes it very difficult to manage the spread of the virus. And so a lot of the analysis is trying to not only identify where there has been spread of the disease and where there have been deaths in addition, but also to look at some of the social aspects. We've seen a couple of projects that are looking at social media and other platforms to try and understand the way different groups in society are reacting to these particular constraints that are placed upon them, or in some cases ignoring them. And also we've watched the data to try and be lined up with historic events. There's been a lot in the news about the early 1900s flu spread and the effect of social distancing, which we called quarantining 100 years ago, that occurred. There's a comparison between what happened in St. Louis and Philadelphia at that time. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but in this case, social distancing, quarantining was imposed very quickly by the city of St. Louis and not so by the city of Philadelphia. And shortly thereafter, the city of St. Louis had well managed the spread, and the cases and deaths spiked tremendously in Philadelphia. Now, the other important lesson learned from that is that as the curve was beginning to bend over in St. Louis, they relaxed those social distancing requirements too early. So even though it was on the far side of the hill, if you will, it was beginning to trend down. When they lifted those restrictions, it spiked very quickly, and they had to reimpose them right away. And so if you look at that curve, it sort of goes up and comes down, and then goes back up and then comes down. And that's a lesson in don't relax those too early, or we can have a real problem.
Right. Okay. All right. Interesting stuff. So, I guess it begs the question, should we have, well, I guess, I don't want to say should we have known about this earlier because of, the data that's out there, or, but maybe that's kind of an unfair question to ask.
It's not unfair. Actually, we have known about this for quite some time. But the challenge is that it's very difficult to gain interest in funding something like what we would need to respond effectively to a pandemic when one does not exist. Other priorities come in and take precedence. But even last year, there were reports that came out just a few months before the first detection of a case, warning about exactly this form of pandemic occurring and the aftermath that we're experiencing right now of it beginning to spread, and we still have a long way to go on this experience.
All right. Well, yeah, I think I think you're right. I think we have quite a while to go still before we're completely over the hump on this one. But hopefully your data that the NCSA is collecting and working with will help us all kind of get through this faster and more safely. So thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. All right, guys, stick around. We've got more TechStrong TV coming up, so please stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community: digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. This is Charlene O'Hanlon. I'm the managing editor at Media Ops, and I'm here now on TechStrong TV with Ben Nierenberg, who is the Executive Vice President of MNJ Technologies. Ben, thanks so much for taking a couple minutes and talking with me today. Appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Excellent, excellent. So I would like to talk to you about SD-WAN. I know that this is a technology, a networking technology that's been around for a bit. I would say maybe, I don't know, almost about 10 years or so. And it's kind of been slowly gaining traction, but I guess with the new kind of work from home paradigm, there's maybe an angle to SD-WAN that a lot of corporations probably find very favorable, and that's kind of that network resiliency angle. So I'm hoping that we can have a conversation about that and just talk about SD-WAN in general and kind of maybe where the market's headed, all that good stuff. But first, why don't you tell us a little bit about MNJ Technologies? What do you guys do?
Yeah, sure. So MNJ Technologies is a 19-year-old company. Started from the ground up as a traditional VAR, value-added reseller that was selling, IT hardware, everything from laptops and desktops all the way through servers and storage. And over years, continued to morph and change. About 4 years ago, we purchased a services company and really jumped into the deep end when it came to edge-based services. So network infrastructure, firewall, router, switch, included a practice around CLEX, so circuits, right? So selling broadband and managing those circuits, and then also telephony and collaboration around the Cisco product line. From there, as we saw the future of the marketplace, about 3.5 years ago, we really started to leverage SD-WAN and get really heavy into understanding the product and what it would mean for the future of the edge for companies. As we looked at it, we thought SD-WAN sat at the center of the universe of all things happening in our industry. And so really that's what led us to that point. So this combination of a traditional hardware reseller into a service provider, and now a full-fledged MSP at the edge.
All right, well, you are definitely speaking my language because I started in telecom, moved into the channel, the IT channel, and now here I am doing DevOps and security. So this is awesome. I would love to have this conversation. So, so let's talk a little bit about SD-WAN. I mean, as I said before, I know that it's been around for a while, but it seems to be becoming an important part of conversation, as more people are, working remotely. So, what is it specifically about SD-WAN that makes it so attractive for this?
Yeah, sure. So I think there's a few things that are going on that makes it attractive. This really started as I began to explain, where we realized SD-WAN was going to be this hub, where you had this movement of SaaS. You had it for UCaaS, right? So voice and collab in the cloud versus legacy PBX on-prem, security in the cloud, this move to hybrid workflows, right, of both colo-neutral facilities and what we would call public cloud. And companies needed a better way to navigate their traffic, to optimize their broadband and optimize their spend. So what started to happen about 2 or 3 years ago, while the technology had been around, it had started to be perfected, and the influx of all of these different trends in our marketplace really made it a more paramount discussion than it ever was. And so you saw companies looking at this as not only a way to reduce operational cost, but a way to change customer experience, right? So if you have an application, a layer 7 application in the cloud, how do you improve your customer, your end user experience with reliability, with no jitter, no chatter, right? We're doing a web conference. We all know when it freezes what we feel like. So how do you begin to take that out? And that's really the impetus of when SD-WAN started to ramp up. Once COVID happened, you had a whole new set of demands being put on the edge of the network with people dialing in and things that were on-premise, so legacy applications, things that were in the cloud. And again, that need for data to travel and data to move effectively and consistently, again, became of hyper importance to the IT staff. And so SD-WAN did that. To now we're even talking about, as we move into remote workforces, can we put SD-WAN at the home, right? Can we have two diverse paths in a Comcast hardwire line and your LTE and create a better optimization at a home as well, where maybe voice was run over over the web, and then maybe your collab tools run over something else. So we've really seen it continue to morph and find ways to, again, I think at the end of the day, improve the overall experience of the end user.
It's really kind of an interesting thought, having kind of a networking, a home-focused networking layout as opposed to a corporate-focused networking layout. It really kind of democratizes networking if you think about it. But how easy would this be for for an individual or for organizations to actually set this up for their employees?
Yeah, so SD-WAN, it comes in different levels of complexity. I always tell people, not all SD-WAN is created equal.
Sure.
There is a large amount of OEMs and manufacturers in this marketplace. It's one of the reasons why we actually support and service over 8 different manufacturers, because we realize each one has its niche. So included in that niche is the level of complexity needed to set up and to deploy. So you have some that are I would say like a fine-tuned engine. It's like a race car, and you really need to understand the inner workings of the combustion engine to know how to make that work. And you have others that are much more plug and play. And so we've seen both take effect, where at a maybe data center or at branch locations, you have a more complex, more robust system. But for the home, some of these very easily deployed SD-WAN that can act as your router, switch, firewall, and SD-WAN to help enable an easier setup and a better experience, and they're working very, very well. Much lower cost as well. And again, it's, as I think we were talking earlier about what the new norm looks like. COVID kind of ripped the Band-Aid off of working remotely, and it's forced companies to say, hey, we didn't lose productivity. We already made the capital investment. Maybe we can be in a more permanent state and branch out in terms of our talent pool and work remote. And so because that Band-Aid's now been ripped, they're looking for more permanent, better solutions, and this is definitely one of them.
It's really, really kind of a fascinating discussion. I think you're probably having with a lot of organizations now. Just the idea of being able to provide employees that bandwidth and network speed and efficiency that they actually get in a corporate environment, being able to have that at home. Is this something that organizations are kind of having serious discussions with you about, maybe as a managed service, or where are you in kind of that discussion phase? I mean, are you getting a lot of feedback from organizations for this particular idea?
Yeah, it's real for sure. And it's real not just at a work from home level. It's real at we need to move quicker within a corporation standpoint, because you have so much coming in now to the network, and you need a better way for data to traverse. You mentioned earlier too, security is a major driver of this as well. Security moves to a single source cloud. SD-WAN helps enable that. But what you're seeing is, and we already saw this with COVID, is when we moved to this remote workforce, there was an influx of help desk calls that came from it. People getting set up, getting used to working from home, adjusting to VPN, right, and dial-ins. And so with SD-WAN, our conversations are you want to avoid that, right? You don't want to overtax your help desk. You don't want to create more work. So it absolutely is a managed service deployment where we're helping them set it up, we're provisioning it for them, and then we're taking the control and the help desk away from that IT group that really doesn't have the infrastructure for that level of call volume, and that comes to us and our help desk and our 24/7 knock. So it really does become a fully managed service play. The other beautiful part about this is too, it now becomes an OpEx cost center versus a CapEx. So that outlay of cash, as people are so careful about the balance sheet and about spending, as an operational cost, it's easier to pallet and allows them to get there quicker.
Okay. So what would need to happen actually at the site, whether it's an employee's home or wherever they're working these days? I mean, are there any networking requirements that they have to have in order to implement SD-WAN at their site?
No, I mean, really, the most important thing is that they have a broadband connection, right? They have something coming to their home. And then go from there is really to wherever that entry point is, go down, whether it's your basement or behind the TV in the living room, and plug that device in and get it to the network. And then from there, we walk them through setting it up. It's already provisioned and ready to go, right? So that's the key. The other piece is making sure we have minimum requirements, understanding what is a minimum bandwidth necessary and how do we do that. And then secondarily, as if we're in an active state, the second piece being the LTE, what does the coverage look like there? So for me, it wouldn't work. I get really bad LTE coverage at home. While I'd love to take advantage of it, I certainly can't. But for others, they do have that ability. And so really it's understanding those needs and assessing that properly.
All right, great. So is there anything else that folks need to know about SD-WAN from a benefits perspective or from a technology perspective that you think that they should know about?
Yeah, I always say a few things. So number one, I said it earlier, not all the SD-WAN is created equal, right? So whether you're looking at your home or retail locations or at your data center, understand that just because someone says it's an SD-WAN device doesn't mean it's the right SD-WAN device for you. So that's number one. Number two, I think SD-WAN was originally touted as the MPLS killer, right? MPLS was going to go away. And certainly while there's areas where we are replacing the MPLS circuit, it's not going away. There's absolutely a need for that. And just don't think you can get rid of that depending upon the quality of service that you need. Thirdly, don't forget that it's not just an operational cost savings, which is what a lot of SD-WAN providers tout. But more importantly, it's a way to change the end user experience, right? It's a way to make layer 7 dance, as I affectionately like to say. It's a way to make applications that drive your everyday business easier to use and more effective at the end user level. And so that becomes paramount as we look at justification of it not just being a cost justification, but what does it do to the end user experience and how much better does it make that? And so we really focus on those things as we move along. And then lastly, most importantly, if you're moving to unified communications in the cloud, whether that be through Cisco or RingCentral or 8x8 or Jive, if you're moving to hybrid cloud workflows, if you're moving to SaaS, any of these things, if you're moving to a single source next-gen firewall in a colo or in the cloud, SD-WAN helps create a better experience and enable all of those things. So you should be having that conversation concurrently as you're discussing about any of those other initiatives in your organization.
All right, great. Well, Ben, thank you so much for walking me through that really, really fascinating discussion about networking. And I know so many people think, the idea of talking about networking is kind of a, dry as dust topic. But hey, you know what? Networking makes the world go round. I think if we didn't have networking, we wouldn't be able to do anything that we've been doing. So thank you very much for your time and for walking us through SD-WAN. Appreciate it.
No, thank you. It's an honor, and we truly appreciate the opportunity. So it's great to be on. So thank you again.
Great. Well, we'll definitely have you guys back on another time.
Excellent.
All right. Okay, everybody, stay tuned for more TechStrong TV. We have lots more coming up, so stick around.
Hey, Charlene, thanks very much. 2 great interviews. Well, you know, after we come back from Charlene, you know what time it is. It's the Analyst Corner with Mitch. Mitchell Ashley has a great interview today, too, with Shane McDonald, VP Sales Engineering at OwnUpsite ERP, Enterprise Resource Management Systems. Good stuff. Mitchell, take it away.
Well, it's that time of the week. Time to look at our flash poll. This week we were focusing instead of on the work at home aspects and how you felt you were productive, all those kind of things. We kind of shifted to software delivery management. Now, I've talked earlier this week in another segment of the Analyst Corner about why we're doing software delivery management research, why we've embarked on this, why we've got a survey out, which we'd love for you to take. It's at acceleratedsurvey.com. Takes 7 minutes. Your input would be hugely valuable. So I'm asking, would you take the survey? We'd love to have your input. But we're really examining this because one of the things that we've always struggled with in software is making sure we're delivering the right software that helps the business, both tactically and strategically. And sometimes we're not always sure on either one of those fronts. And that's what this research is largely about, is how do you assess those things? Where is your kind of maturity level of being able to do that? Now, in the current economic times, that's super important. So please take that survey. One aspect that we're looking at in this research is silos. We asked this question in the flash poll. It's also in the survey that you can take online. The question was, how well do you think you've succeeded in breaking down silos in your organization as a result of adopting approaches like DevOps? Kind of leaves it a little open. Maybe think about Agile, DevOps, things like that. I would say that the answers were entirely surprising. There's some good news and there's a lot of work left to do news. If you look at the kind of top 2 positive responses, we've made the most progress. The first one was a great deal. The number of responses were 13%, and a lot was sort of the next behind it. These are all relative kind of feel type, what's your sense of where you are. Well, that was 12%. So between the two, 25% of the respondents felt they had made really good progress. They're down that road. They're seeing changes. The silos are being broken down, people working together, sort of the funny business, monkey business of internal politics, well, haven't gone away, but at least the silo part of it is certainly lessened. But that's good news. Now, if you look at sort of the middle group, the folks that said, well, we've made a moderate amount of progress or a little bit of progress, those respectively were 21% for both of them, 21 and 21. So you're looking at 42% of people that felt that way. And if you layer on top of that, the folks that said none at all, respondents were 32%. So between none at all and some progress, a moderate amount, a little amount, you're looking at what, 54%? There's a lot of work left to do when you start adding all these together. Actually, it's 74% because you have 25%, 26% on the top 2. So it's talking 3/4 of the folks who said either no progress or we've made some, but there's a lot to go. So the reason why I tie this together with what I was saying previously about the current situation with COVID-19, the economic impact, and we're hearing numbers every day. We're hearing numbers of the number of people who have applied for unemployment. We're hearing about layoffs and furloughs that are happening. ADP released some numbers today about what they're seeing in their payroll, people that have been laid off. We haven't seen the unemployment number itself. Predictions I've seen range from 12.1 to 18.5. I mean, those are well past what we saw in 2008, the housing crisis, which hovered around 10%, if I remember right. And so it's huge. I mean, there's huge disruption going on. At the same time, because of the safety concerns around COVID, it's forcing us, I believe, to shift to more digital interactions. Not that we don't want to have everything be digital. We want human contact and interaction. But we may have some period of time. We may have some lapses and peaks and ups and downs between now and over the next, say, 12 to 18 months. We'll see what happens. Could be 6 months and things are in good shape, but you don't know. And that's part of what what boardrooms and executive organization teams are doing right now is they're strategizing, they're thinking of scenarios. So what if this happens? What if this happens within our industry? What if this happens with our customers? What are 2 or 3 likely outcomes? It's one of the ways that you do strategic planning is you create what you think are possible futures and you start to define those. And then, well, which one do you think is likely to happen given what you know today? And the others are possible futures if conditions changed, or you may kind of rejigger all of them a little bit if things change substantially. But that's how you kind of think about what the future is and how you develop plans, because you can't just sit there and wait for more bad news and see what it is and then react to it. I mean, yes, you will do that, but that isn't your only strategy. It's the only thing that you're focused on. So as we're concentrating on software delivery management, I'd really like you to think about software delivery, our ability to create software as an organization, as a capability of the company, not of developers, not of DevOps people, not of testing people, not of security, operations, product. It's all of that and more that comes together, because if companies are going to react to delivering contactless services or maybe changing products and services substantially, I mean, the airline business could look very different in 1 to 2 years, depending on what happens. There's some pretty big shifts that might need to happen. And guess what? All of those are going to require software, nearly all of them. Can't imagine too many that wouldn't. And it's going to increase the interaction and the engagement and the involvement of how we talk to our customers, how they interact with us, order and receive services. Even if it's curbside, still more digital interaction as opposed to less. So our ability to deliver software can be a huge strategic advantage to the company, and DevOps and Agile, things like that, can be uniters, can help us get past some of those organizational boundaries, the silos, the politics and funny business, and things that nobody knows why it is that way. What happened 20 years ago? Who knows why it's that way? Now things can change. So it's a great time to re-examine those things and think about how you can work more closely together. Tough times pull people together, get us working together more closely, and align some of our interests. So I think we'll certainly have a good bit of that. So thank you for participating in our poll on DevOps.com. And we certainly would love to have you be part of our research in software delivery management. The survey is available at acceleratedsurvey.com. Takes 7 minutes to complete. That's the SurveyMonkey estimate about how it takes. The questions are pretty straightforward. We didn't pile on these big, 2 by 10 by matrix that you got to kind of answer multiple times, and those get a little much to handle at times. So we tried to do it in a way that would make it pretty straightforward. Some of the questions might be challenging a little bit to really think about where are we on this journey? How good are we at understanding the value, or are we delivering value through our software, and how do we prioritize the work that goes into that? A lot of really good, interesting, meaty questions that hopefully you've got some answers to, and I'm sure others you probably don't have a good answer to yet because you're still learning and working and building towards that future. But I think the focus on software delivery management, focus on working together, using DevOps as a uniter across the organization, can be something that will be extremely valuable to the business. As new strategies get put in place, a response to opportunities and threats happen, and as even kind of thinking about what our next opportunity might be, if you're either looking for work or think that might be in your future. Certainly people that can make a difference to the business will be folks that will be near the front of the line to be considered for a temporary or full-time role. So I wish you the best. I'm saddened if the economy has affected you in your role. I mean, certainly it's hit the service industry hard, but there's some impacts to IT and to product and marketing and business and other parts of the audiences that we speak to and work with every day. So saddened if that's affected you. The good news is it will be brighter. There will be a positive turn to what's happening. And I hope you do well through the process. And if you still have your job, just be thankful be thankful for that, and also thankful for the people that you get to work with. I know I am. I work with some of the best people I've ever worked with, people I really enjoy being around as well as working with, and I'm extremely blessed that way, and I hope you are in some way too. So as we part for the week, just ask that you be well, be safe, and be careful out there, and we'll be talking to you again on Analyst Corner.
Hey everyone, Alan Schimmel, CEO, founder of Media Ops here. I want to personally invite you to join us on June 4th for 12 hours strong of TechStrong. TechStrong Con is our conference that we're putting together. You know, the tech industry is so built, and it was such an integral piece of our existence and identity of going to so many conferences, communicating, collaborating, networking, seeing your friends in the industries, your peers. And, you know, just because we can't get together in person anymore, we can certainly do it virtually. We've been doing virtual events at Media Ops for 2 years. We think we've got them down. It's, you know, it's a really immersive experience. But what I'm really excited about with TechStrong is, you know, my friend John Willis, my partner in Digital Anarchist, John's put together an amazing lineup of speakers. I think unlike any you've seen at a virtual DevOps, cloud native, DevSecOps, or cybersecurity related conference before. Check it out. Go to techstrongcon.com. Registration, attendance is free, but space is limited. We hope to see you there. It's 12 hours all day, June 4th. techstrongcon.com. Stay well, stay healthy, stay strong. TechStrong.
This is Digital Anarchist.
I'm here with Shane McDonald, who is VP of Sales Engineering at Onapsis, and we're talking about SAP, ERP, great exciting stuff. Well, if you're in that field, it certainly is. But we're talking about not only those applications, but of course, security and DevOps. So good to have you. Nice to be talking with you, Shane.
Yeah, Mitch, thanks very much for having me on. Excited to talk to you today.
So I have to admit, it's not every day that I have a conversation about ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning, and security around it, though I'm sure it's a huge concern, obviously, because of the kinds of data and systems those are involved. They touch all parts of the organization just about. Mm-hmm. What's your experience as things have moved into the cloud, as well as still being on site, of how people treat security around ERP systems?
Yeah, so Mitch, you're dead on, right? And so with 77% of the world's daily transaction revenue touching one of these systems, they're pretty important. And so what organizations are traditionally doing when they're thinking about security is really just thinking about things in terms of, you know, who has access to what and what are the proper authorizations and roles and privileges that they have in that organization. And what my organization is helping people understand is opening that world up to them and seeing that all the traditional areas inside of, you know, the application that you're doing in the rest of your ecosystem is applicable to the ERP and to SAP as well. So looking at your traditional security technologies like vulnerability management, compliance automation, and real-time monitoring. But also as we think about the development side of things and making sure that you're doing kind of application security testing, making sure that you're doing that package and transport analysis as you get along the ways there. And so in my experience, what we're seeing is that as people are at this really unique point with their ERPs, looking at cloud technologies, looking at getting from kind of this new S4 HANA environment that they're rolling out, that they're taking an opportunity to figure out how they can, you know, shift left like everyone else already has.
And tell us a little bit too about Onapsis and your place in the ecosystem and what your company does.
Sure, thanks, Mitch. So, you know, at Onapsis, we've been around for 10 years, and really our bread and butter and what we're doing is helping organizations with these mission critical applications. We were founded by two gentlemen, Mariano Nunez and Victor Montero, and they were two security researchers that were continually getting brought in to kind of red team and pen test environments, and they were consistently finding that it was very easy to get into the ERP. and is very, by using some really old and legacy techniques, still able to walk right through the front doors. And when you thought about the types of data that were inside these ERPs, you know, you're talking your financials, your back office, intellectual property, this is something that they thought was really important that they brought to the market and that people really started to think about securing from a programmatic and framework level.
Interesting. I totally get what you mean about the traditional security things you might consider around an application, especially one as complex and as broadly impacting to an organization, things like access control permissions and data integrity and things like that. But you said a word that actually triggered a thought for me, and that is it's back office. I mean, we think of that as not front of store, not the thing that's presenting the goods and the flashy website that can easily be attacked, or the mobile application, or something transacting through email, though it may touch all those things. That's not what you think of an ERP system. Is the importance in the cybersecurity of that become more elevated, or has it really just been kind of taken serious all the time, but behind the scenes, most people don't see it?
Well, I think what you're seeing is you're seeing that kind of the security community is getting a lot smarter about this, but also kind of that other side, the bad actors are getting smarter about this as well. And when you're hearing about, you know, different breaches and exploits that are happening across the world, they'll tell you how people got in, but they don't necessarily tell you what they were after, right? And when you think about what the responsible for inside of your organization, you're paying of people, your confidential information. This is really valuable information to that group, and so you're seeing a lot more around getting into the environment, access to these types of systems. There was a recent report by IDC that 6% of RPs.
Hey Shane, hold on just a second. We're getting a lot of drops on your audio and video.
Oh.
Are you on Wi-Fi? Just pausing here for a second.
Yeah, I am actually. So I was hoping that wouldn't happen, so I dialed that there.
Interesting. Yeah, we'll splice things together here.
Okay.
So you're coming over cellular? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Usually it can be, who knows, could be a mixed bag. Let's try it again. Just go ahead and start with your answer to that question.
Sure. So where was I? So we were talking about the.
So the question is, you know, it's not a front of store system. People don't think about it as front of house. This is a back off system, and you know, has it always been treated seriously in terms of cybersecurity, or is it new things being taken on about how you address cybersecurity for ERP?
Yep. And so certainly this is something that we're seeing both the security community and the attack community get a lot smarter about. Unfortunately, sometimes it's the attack community that gets more knowledgeable faster, and then we're put in a position to react. But really, if you're looking at the escalation of breaches that have occurred in the ERP space, it's continued to go up and up and up, starting all the way back about a decade ago with the Greek Ministry of Finance being attacked via their ERP. And really what's happening is folks have understood that, you know, once you're inside of an organization, it's not about getting on to, you know, an organization's network or getting past their firewall. Really, they're centered at the types of data that they want to pull out, and they want to understand where the valuable data is. Well, when you think about what your ERP is doing for your company, it's paying your vendors, it's paying your employees, it's holding your, privileged information about your vendors, clients, people, et cetera. This is very valuable to take out of that. And so what you're seeing is a big escalation in the types of attacks that are taking place there. A recent study by IDC found that in the past 24 months, about 64% of ERPs had been breached or attempted to breach in the marketplace today.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting to talk about getting access to some really valuable data. It's also great data to lock up and do some ransomware around. Right?
Yeah.
You hear about all the state governments. I have to imagine, you know, other organizations too. I have to imagine an ERP system would be a prime target to encrypt or lock down, so somebody can't get access to it until you pay them a bunch of money.
Yep. Absolutely, Mitch. And when you think about the amount of systems that we still encounter that are using unsecure protocols and passing things in plain text and plain language, it's things that are very easily done. There are vulnerabilities like 10K Blaze that's been out for over a decade that allow, if you can ping a system, you can essentially take complete command and control of that environment and really do whatever you want at that point.
How much of ERP is moving to the cloud versus on-prem, or is it still largely on-prem because of the other systems that are located there?
In a market as a whole, you're starting to see a movement to the cloud. And when I say cloud, I really mean both in terms of IaaS and SaaS, right? So you're starting to see people that are doing the lift and shift, but then also people that are starting to adopt some of the newer cloud ERPs that are out there today. And really, yeah, exactly. And so really you're starting to see, a group of people using this as an opportunity to take a look at some of the, lagging technologies and processes that they're doing, right? And so to give you some clarity, right, in the SAP ecosystem, a lot of folks are at that juncture where they have to go from their current, well, it's technically their last gen, but their current ERP technology called ECC 6.0, and they want to move into the latest and greatest S4 environment because you take advantage of performance, a bunch of reasons, and as well as being able to connect into some of SAP's cloud connectors that they've got there. Now, because of this, it's giving folks an opportunity to evaluate the cloud, but then also evaluate kind of their DevOps process along the way as well. So if we're doing everything in a waterfall methodology, maybe this is an opportunity with the amount of things that I have to do to, data convert to fit into the new, this is an opportunity to allow my groups to start doing that continuous improvement that we'd want to get to there. So from moving from the on-prem into the cloud, what we're still typically seeing is a lot of on-prem deployments, but everyone is really starting to evaluate some type of cloud strategy to get themselves there.
Well, and it can't be even a lift and shift, more or less go into a SaaS-based service or some combination. It has got to be extremely complex. You and I were talking earlier about, I was jokingly saying, which is also true, 3 things I know about ERP is they're very costly, they're very large, take multiple years, and they're usually 2 or 3 years late. They're just huge, massive efforts because it affects so much of the organization. So give us a context of how do you shift that kind of an implementation into a DevOps style? What does that look like? Is it the whole thing's moving to DevOps? Is it certain parts of it? How do you start to move down the path of DevOps with ERP?
Yeah, so I think everything starts with a plan, right? I mean, even in the first step of DevOps, it's all about the plan, right? And so when we start talking to organizations about helping them get there across a kind of continuous improvement cycle, it's not about trying to do it all at once. It's about trying to take off a chunk and figure out what we want to do and build that into a process work stream. And so we talk about things in groups of 3, but you can get even more granular than that. But if we start with just taking things from a security perspective and securing what you have, and then starting to focus on your quality, and then maybe getting to your maturity from there, it's a way that you can break the process down a little bit more. And so in the ERP world, a lot of the challenges that have typically been there are in being able to do this work in an automated fashion. So once you've got your plan or your change request that's been filed, the coding and the building that has to take place there is still largely manual. And so as you start to get through that manual checklist and manual code review process that you have to do, you're then moving into, doing your package management. And believe it or not, Mitch, like a lot of this stuff is still handled on spreadsheets. Jenkins, Jira, all this stuff, it doesn't really work in the SAP world. And so where we're able to help on that half of the equation is through, application security management and some of our static and dynamic code analysis. Quick plug here is recently the Gartner Magic Quadrant came out around application security testing, and for the first time, Onapsis has been entered that and recognized as the importance of doing this not only for your application ecosystem but also your ERPs. And so we're able to help with that code build, helping you stay clean, but also get clean in your legacy environment as well. and then moving that up through and enabling folks to do that package, or what in the SAP world is called a transport inspection, to make sure that there's completeness there. And as you go to deploy and you go to build, you're not looking at data downgrade events or any of those nasty things that could cause downtimes. Now, I could tell you some more stories, Mitch. There have been a lot of funny things that we found along the way. It's in terms, I mean, they're horror stories. They're fun to laugh about now, but it's, you know, we've seen things like developers sticking in personal Gmail addresses in transports at the last minute. We've seen things that cause, you know, database downgrade events. So all types of things that happen there. So on that half of the equation, it's about helping the developers and helping them really put together an automated orchestration process to build their applications. And then on the other half of the equation, when you get into kind of the application maintenance and the deploy and the monitor and maintain, you know, we're helping with kind of some of our traditional security technologies, you know, being able to monitor the environment, make sure people are doing what they're supposed to be doing, making sure that if you start to see performance degradation, being able to understand where that's coming from. So a lot of things that we're able to do to help people incorporate that as part of their DevOps, as in their journey to DevOps.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. You know, oftentimes that journey to DevOps also, because you're breaking things down into much smaller pieces of work and automating it and iterating much more fast, much more quickly. Oftentimes that accompanies a move to more of a cloud native, or at least the start around containers and microservices. Do you see that? Is that happening too as teams are moving to DevOps with ERP systems?
Absolutely. I mean, I think all of the big, you know, I'll call them super clouds out there, have some type of way to help organizations get from their on-prem in there and to do it in a containerized fashion. A lot of our partners that we work with out there, the Accentures, Deloitte, IBMs, SAPs, they all have their own process and capabilities to really help make things a little bit more standardized and roll things out in more of a containered fashion, right? So absolutely, we're seeing that across the marketplace.
Right. Interesting. If you were talking to an audience of people interested in ERP, and we certainly have, you know, some folks in this audience that are, what are some of the lessons learned you might share with folks that are starting to think about their journey either to the cloud or to DevOps?
Mm-hmm. So I'll break that apart, right? But one hand really does feed the other. So if I'm starting my journey into the DevOps process with SAP, the first thing that I want to take a look at is understanding that the native tools I have aren't going to help me get there. One of the biggest problems that we see, Mitch, in people being resistant to doing kind of code analysis or anything around that is the amount of false positives that you'll run into. And so, you know, in a common environment, we'll see about 2 million lines of custom code that's written for the ERP. And in our world, there's about 8 critical flaws found in that code per 1,000 lines of code. So kind of a high flaw rate that you see there. So if you look at that 2 million and we're talking about 8, we're talking about 16,000 flaws just to start off start your day with. Now, if you've got a false positive rate of, of just maybe 10%, that's 1,600 flaws that you're going to have to work against. And then you're going to find out that they're not real. Think about the time that's wasted and the resources that goes into that there. And so when you start to think about going into the DevOps world, what you want to look at is automated tools, but you want to make sure that they're representing a very low false positive rate. Otherwise, you're starting off with a flawed premise, and you're going to be looking at things retrospectively going, man, it was a lot faster when we did things sequentially instead of trying to do that feedback loop that we have there.
And in fact, it's the dealing with all those misleading information, not helpful, that sends you off on goose, what is it? Rabbit trails, whatever the word is.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, you start going down in the path, and it's a path to nowhere. So, you start with that process, and then as you move things through just a typical change management, being able to look at that and understand not only what the work that your team is doing, but also all your third-party integrations. So one of the big challenges in ERP is really understanding those dependencies, right? Mm-hmm. So if I fix this, if I make this improvement, if I bring this vendor in, how is that going to affect my production systems? And so getting a lens into understanding how things can affect will allow you to deploy much, much faster. So one of our technologies that we do around the transport analysis is really that impact analysis there, not only for your custom code, but for third parties as well. And so this is really important because it gives your basis team, the application owners there, a lot of confidence to be able to deploy quickly. Because if there is going to be an issue, we're able to bring that right to the forefront and prevent that change from being made, so you don't have to worry about taking anything off. So being able to commit changes quickly with confidence gives a lot more faith into the DevOps process because you aren't worried about the really, really bad things happening, unplanned downtime events and those types of issues that would occur.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned all the third-party or external apps that you're integrating with, which is pretty massive when you start going down the list of everything from document signing to PDF formatting to now getting to your core data within your corporation that you're using. Are there any recommendations that you have about how you think about integration with third-party apps and some things to consider as you're either selecting or evaluating, assessing your current apps that you're using that you need to interface with, say, a new ERP?
Yeah, absolutely. So, without any product, I'd always recommend making sure that you're working with a vendor that's gone through the certification process to make sure that they've at least had the parent vendor, SAP, Oracle, look at what you're trying to incorporate and make sure that they've at least signed off on it. The second thing that I would do is I would always make sure that you inspect that transporter add-on that's going on. We used to have this joke, back in the office that prior to really being able to do any type of transport inspection, what we did as an application ownership team was you released the third party, you import it, and then you prayed that everything went and didn't cause any downtime event. And the reason why that was done that way was because to be able to really analyze everything that was happening in the transport was very difficult. Just in the custom code, when you're using a third party, a lot of that source code, of course, is abstracted. And so you don't really know what's happening there. So you really, if you're doing any type of new ERP and you're bringing a third party in, it's so important to make sure, whether you're doing it manually, whether you're using our technologies, but to inspect what's going to happen so that you know what you're bringing into your environment.
Mm-hmm. So I have to turn to a COVID-19 question.
Okay.
since we're all living in the middle of that.
I had the beard before. So
you had the beard before, and we're not having to wear masks, at least not over Zoom anyway. Organizations, of course, having to react to the financial impact of the economy that COVID-19 has kind of created for us. Some organizations conserve cash. Let's back off on some of our initiatives. Other organizations are, let's double down because this is super important. We're going to be around as the economy recovers, or during bad economic times may actually be a great time for them to create some new offerings or new ways of doing business. What are you seeing your customers doing? Are most of them pulling back, or most of them saying, look, we have to do this anyway. Let's just get this done as quickly as we can and focus on it, maybe do some more innovative things along with it?
Yeah, so what we're seeing in the ERP space is that change is inevitable and change continues to happen. So even in the ERP world, where we're seeing any type of slowdown isn't necessarily organizationally speaking, but more vertical based. So certainly we deal with a lot of different verticals at our organization and things around the things that you guess are slowing down, tourism, travel, all of those projects are more at okay, we're going to take a break and see what we can work with what we have. That doesn't mean their ERP isn't going to keep running. And so those folks are still very, very busy because now maybe instead of incorporating a net new technology, we're working on bug fixes in what we already have and what we have to do to roll out new business functionality that we had in terms of everything that we've had in that world. outside of those kind of affected verticals, you're seeing business as usual. There's still a lot of S4 migrations that are planned and moving forward as you're expecting. You're seeing organizations starting to adopt new ways of doing business. I think with everyone deployed remotely now, it's introducing some accelerants to some of maybe the mobile initiatives they had around some of the Fiori or S4 type of initiatives that they had in that place. So it's really across the board. But to answer specifically as I can, I'd say, the verticals that you'd expect to be affected by this are, slowing things down and focusing around bug fixes and continuous improvement in the core of what they've got. And in other areas, you're seeing acceleration in things like mobile technologies.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense from a vertical. You mentioned hospitality industry is hugely affected, as is airlines, of course. It's interesting at the same time, you see some companies more usually on the smaller end that are shifting their business model as much as going from B2B to go to B2C. Cheetah is an example of that. But you also see smaller innovations happening too, like one hospital, which had a large campus, shifted to delivering their testing materials to the lab and the results back and forth via drone. Instead of, you can get that much faster. If you think about if you're doing COVID-19 tests, you need a quick results or maybe something else that's super important. But people are looking for contactless ways of doing things. They're also having to shift to the market conditions of how customers are looking at safety and want to get their services from those companies.
Yeah.
Those are all business processes, whether they're delivered through a mobile app or not. The back-end system is going to be some form of an ERP system that's going to be touching and at least providing data, probably the transaction flow for a good amount of that. Agree?
I absolutely agree. And so when you look at everything that we're talking about, the ERP already has this back-end business function or program that's been built there. And so now as you're looking at different ways to do automated payments or maybe different ways that you can handle your inventory or supply chain, these are all tweaks to existing programs that exist in your ERP. And so, development teams have to go through looking at some of these sometimes decades old programs and seeing how they can accommodate these different types of changes that are going on.
Yeah, you live in interesting times, as they say, the Chinese proverb, right? Maybe too interesting sometimes. Well, Shane McDonald, it's been great having you on and talking with you today. And I wish you the best with your company. Congratulations on your Magic Quadrant appearance. That's
Thank you.
Fantastic. Good for you. Onapsis, folks can get to your website.com, onapsis.com, ONAPSIS.
Yep, onapsis.com. And if you're interested in anything I talked about, we offer something called a business risk illustration in which we can come on site and give you a little insight into how your teams are doing and if there's any opportunity to improve things like coding and transport inspection. So certainly come check us out.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
Good. Great talking with you, Shane. Take care.
Mitch, thanks for having me on. Bye-bye. You too.
Bet.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Thanks, Mitchell. Great stuff there today. Guys, I think that's going to wrap it for a busy, busy Friday here on TechStrong TV, wrapping up a busy, busy week. Hope to see you next week. But until then, enjoy the weekend. Get some sun if you can. Be strong. Be safe. Be well. Be strong. TechStrong. Have a great weekend.